Good evening. My name is Sophia Lloyd Still, and I'm presenting Peru's disaster management. Why is disaster management organized the way it is? Well, the country has moved from a reactive to preventative method when dealing with disasters. This is due to the consistency of natural disasters within the country, such as earthquakes, floods, landslides, which can be very hard to predict and can happen on a large range of scales. The government has established specific committees and jobs for different organizations to do so that there is no confusion and optimal collaboration. These different committees are in charge of specific things. This falls under the Synagard law, and it helps make sure that there's no confusion and that there are not multiple groups do multiple things and telling communities and local governments different things. They've made to centralize the plans and the infrastructure for disaster management into one organization with specific rules for different committees. The budget for disaster prevention and recovery has grown substantially. There has been $24 million allocated to major hospitals for them to be improved in order to help more people after disasters. And the budget for disaster risk reduction grew from 19 million US dollars to 400 million. The government has created a different infrastructure and tried to advance it to make sure that buildings are built properly and in a way that will cause the least damage if a severe natural disaster were to occur. And they are trying to build where in the areas where most populations live in a way that would prevent, or not prevent, but have the least destruction and issues if a landslide were to occur, if there were flooding to occur. Try and just prepare for these events instead of just dealing with them afterwards. And they use a combination of top-down and bottom-up approach when dealing with disasters. Going into this combined approach, responses are triggered by the local government, but the national government has laid out the proper steps and approach for dealing with disasters. So that is done, or it is supposed to be done, the same across all of Peru. The national government only does not get involved in 11% of disasters, but when taking into account the statistic, it is important to consider that smaller scale earthquakes and flooding might not be taken into account the statistics because local governments might not report it, since they could be such a small scale that there is no question of whether the national government has to get involved or not. So that could also contribute to this statistics. The national government sets forth the proper mechanisms for preventing disasters and what to avoid, and it is the responsibility of local governments to implement these. The national government says which areas to avoid building in and how to build new buildings, how to create new infrastructure so that it is preventing bad consequences after disasters occur. The disasters that Peru is prone to is earthquakes, floods, landslides, and a lot of landslides occur as a product of earthquakes and floods, and it happens afterwards. They are affected by El Nino events and the Pacific Ring of Fire. El Nino is a climate pattern that occurs in the Pacific Ocean when the top surface of warm water gets more warm, and it leads to heavier rainfall, which can lead to flooding and landslides. And while these events don't occur every year at a consistent time, they occur randomly and can be very hard to predict and forecast. But when they do occur, they can lead to very intense flooding and landslides, which is what happened in 2017 when there was an insane amount of flooding that led to a lot of deaths and injuries. Peru is also located within the Pacific Ring of Fire, which is a lot of volcanoes and tectonic activity. It goes from the southern tip of South America to the west coast of North America, and 90% of earthquakes occur within this area. So this makes Peru very susceptible to earthquakes, and while a lot of them fall on a smaller scale, they can also be very large earthquakes. Participants in the country's disaster management. The national government is the primary actor, and non-government organizations only provide aid in about 26% of disasters, since so many are smaller scale disasters and it is not necessary. But some of the national non-governmental organizations are Red Cross, Doctors Without Borders, and World Vision. Some of these even have offices set up in Peru, since when they do have a large-scale disaster, they can be very destructive in Peru. And the Peruvian government is very open with reports of deaths and injuries and the severity of disasters, so NGOs will get involved when it is necessary, and there is a lot of collaboration between the government and NGOs. Some potential obstacles are politics, since a lot of smaller communities will get overlooked by the national government, and these smaller communities tend to be poorer and have a weaker infrastructure. So while it is important that these smaller communities probably be prioritized more when a disaster hits them, they can sometimes be overlooked, and this can lead to more destructive effects for them, since they're more susceptible to damages and needing help to recover from a natural disaster. The distribution of the population is also an issue, since the population is heavily concentrated in high-risk areas. A majority of the population lives in certain areas of Peru, and these are high-risk areas where when a disaster strikes, the consequences are more severe. So this can impact a lot of people, simply because of the sheer fact that a lot of the population will live there. And the geography also makes it difficult in Peru, since the Amazon rainforest is located there and the Andes Mountains. A lot of communities are located within these geographies. It can be very difficult to reach and get resources to and aid to when a natural disaster occurs. And these are my references for the project, and please feel free to reply with any questions you may have.